Our learning which I'm from Beis Hamikdash. And should be a panacea. Refuah Shleima for Yifil Nassan Ben Sarah. So we're going to start on the Mishnah on Lamed Vav. Lamed Vav Amud Beis. Mishnah says, "Ein oigdim es halulav ela b'minai." The lulav needs to be tied with its own type. You can't have a different type of string now. It has to be tied with a lulav strap or a hada strap, something that's made from one of the species. It doesn't say necessarily the lulav would be the easiest because it's Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Eimer afilu b'chot b'mishicha. That could be two separate things. Could be one thing. Rabbi Meir says you can use a cord or a rope or a band. You could use something else. Amar Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, I said there was a story. The people of Yerushalayim, the people of Yerushalayim would use rings of gold to tie their lulavim. Amrulai, so they said to Reb Meir, that's not a proof. See, there's a machlekes here. Are you allowed to use anything else to tie the lulav with? Today it would be a rubber band. Can you use anything else? So Reb Meir says yes. In Yerushalayim they use gold. Rabbi Yehuda says no. That's twisting. And they told Reb Meir that no. In Yerushalayim, really it was wrapped underneath. The gold was just on the outside. It was wrapped underneath with lulav bands. That was the decorations. Amar Rava says, "Afilu b'siv, afilu b'ikr dedikla." Rava adds in. He said that you have to use a lulav band. You could also use the fibers that grow around the date tree. They're these like cloth type looking things. Those fibers, you can use those, and you can also use the trunk of the tree. I think it maybe means the bark of the tree. If you could turn it into like a string of some sort, that's also acceptable. Now, the truth is, it's not the lulav branch that you're taking, but since it's another part of the lulav tree, it's still acceptable. That's what Rava says. Amar Rava, my time with the Rabbi Yehuda. Rava says, what's Rabbi Yehuda's reason that says that it needs to be part of the four species? Kasavar lulav tzarech heged. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a lulav needs to be tied. We had a machlekes before. Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. Does the lulav need to be tied? In other words, is it kosher if it's not tied together? Rabbi Yehuda holds it's not. Rabbi Yehuda holds the lulav needs to be tied. And since this is part of the mitzvah, if you would bring another species, some other type of rope, I don't know, some ivy thing that you could use to tie, if you would bring that, so have a chamisha mini, then you would not have four species, you would have five species. And that's a problem. Okay. Rava also says, how do I know that because it's part of the lulav tree, the date palm, so it's considered the same species as the lulav? Oh, the date palm is not the lulav? It is the lulav. The date palm is the lulav. Only thing is the lulav itself is that one branch. Are you allowed to use other parts of that tree? Same species. The same species, but maybe it's something else from the tree is considered a different species. How do I know that it's the same species? In other words, we didn't talk about making strings out of the actual dates. I don't know, whatever. But would that be the same species? So anything that's part of the tree, it seemed to be the same species. Rabbi says, let me prove that to you. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Basukas teishru, Sukkah shall call David the Reb Meir. It says that you should build a sukkah. You should dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. What do you make the sukkah out of? What's the stock? Anything you want. As long as it grows from the ground, it's not a makabel tumah, and it's detached. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ain't sukkah nehegas ela b'dalad minin shabalula." Rabbi Yehuda says, no. The sukkah, the schach of the sukkah needs to be the 4 species. You need to have lulav branches, hadassim, the myrtle, and aravas. What are you going to do with esrog? I guess you can put, the foliage from the tree, from the esrog tree, trimming. Because the esrog itself would be a problem. You can't use fruit. And I'll tell you why this is logical. It says, lulav is not so strict. It's only by day. It's not by night. But nevertheless, I can only use 4 species. Sukkah, a sukkah that's very strict. For sure, it should only be the 4 species. If what's lenient has this limitation, what's strict for sure should have this limitation. An obligation by day and by night. Amrullah, they responded to Rabbi Yehuda. They gave a general rule. They said, I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to make a kal v'chomer. But a kal v'chomer, what you're supposed to end up with a kal v'chomer is that the strict one is for sure strict. That's how it's supposed to end up. But over here, what's going to end up is that the strict one, which is the sukkah, is going to end up being more lenient. Why? Because let's say you can't find enough schach from lulavim and hadassim and arabas. You're going to just say, okay, I don't have a sukkah this year. Oh, well, and you sit outside the sukkah. So it really comes out in some cases where it's going to be a leniency. Say, I don't have enough. And you're going to exempt yourself from sukkah because you don't have. So the truth is that there was really no exemption there because you have all types of stuff. You have evergreens and, coconut palms. You have everything else. And you have bamboo. So, loy matzah arbas minim yeshiv batal v'aterem b'sukkah shivas yamim sukkah shall kol davar. So they told to Rabbi Yehuda that what are you going to do? Just sit outside and not have any sukkah, yeshiv batal, and not fulfill the mitzvah. And the Torah says that you have to do the mitzvah of sukkah, and by you it's going to be a leniency. So therefore, we don't like the kal v'chomer. The kal v'chomer, you're making it stricter, but in the end, it's going to end up being a leniency. Then it says, V'chein be'ezra imer, by Ezra it says, Tzehu hahar. Let's go out to the mountain. This is when the Jewish people came back from Babylonia, Eretz Yisrael. So they were being taught by Ezra, the halachas, Ezra and Nehemiah. They were telling them how to fulfill the mitzvahs. I think it says that they celebrated Sukkot like they never celebrated since Yeshua ben Nun. They made some big celebration. He tells them, go out to the mountain. Go get olive wood, 8 oil wood. Doesn't say what that is. Oh, pine. That's interesting. Yeah. There's some guessing in that. Hadas, which is myrtle, Ali Tamarim, which is date branches, palm branches, and Ali Eitzaves is another type of hadas. And you should make sukkahs. What type of wood are they using for the sukkah? So they're using olive wood, and they're using pine wood or shemen, whatever that is. Obviously, you're allowed to use other species for the sukkah, not just the 4 species. So that's a good proof. Okay, Rav is not finished what he wanted to say, but meanwhile, we're going through this conversation. The conversation We have to now explain Rabbi Yehuda's view, because Rabbi Yehuda says that you can only use the four species for the Sukka. That's his opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Hani leDefanes Ali Hadas Vali Tmar Vali Etzavas L'Sach, that you have to make walls. The walls were made out of olive wood. It's very expensive. Sukka. Well, the pine is cheap, but I'm sorry, olive wood would be expensive. It grows so slow, but the schach was the fourth species. That's the idea of it. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda can always get out of this. They say, "What are you talking about? You can make a lulav out of any type of wood. Look, we have a pasuk that says what to use." He says, "Yeah, that's the walls. The schach, he holds, still needs to be the fourth species." Okay, Rav is concluding his statement. Utanan misachim b'nesarim, and I have a mishnah. We learned it earlier. The first parak says that you can use boards for schach. It's machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's acceptable to use boards. What type of boards are you using? Rabbi Yehuda holds that you can only use the four species. Must be that included in the four species is the trunk and the branches of those trees is also considered part of the four species. Goes back, he tells us, Alma Sivik the Diklamina de Lulvo Shmamina. It's like a rather long proof. But if Rabbi Yehuda holds that you're only allowed to use the four species, and he also holds that you're allowed to use boards, it must be that the trunk of the tree is considered part of the same species as the lulav. And the same would apply to the fiber that grows around the tree. Shmamina. Okay. Umi Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Arba Sbirim in Midachin Elai. Does Rabbi Yehuda really say that you can only use the four species? You have a problem now. Look at this. Vatanya Sicha b'Nesarim Shaleres. It says if you used cedar wood boards, eres we translate as cedar. Sheish b'em dalet tvachim, that has four tvachim, would probably smell very nice. So if Divrei Kol Psula, everyone says that it's possible. This was a proof that the machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir is only about boards that are three tvachim. That was the opinion of Shmuel before. The Gemara before said a machlekes Rav and Shmuel. When Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to use boards, how big are they? Rav said 4 tvachim, Shmuel said 3 tvachim. Shmuel says I have a brisa that supports me. Look, see, everyone holds that 4 tvachim is possible. Machlekes, where did Rabbi Yehuda allow it? That was only 3 tvachim. Ein bem dalet tvachim. Rav Meir paisel Rabbi Yehuda machshev. If you don't have 4, then Rav Meir says it's still not good. That's the machlekes. If it's in between 3 and 4, is the way the Gemara explained it. But and Rabbi Yehuda says that it's kosher. Rav Meir, and Rav Meir agrees, even though he holds that you can't use the boards, but nevertheless, if you remove every other board, you space it out. That you can put kosher schach in between, and it's going to be acceptable. Okay. What was our point? Our point is, what type of boards are they? Made out of cedar wood. How big are the boards? They're 3 tvachim. Rabbi Yehuda holds that they're kosher. 1 second. Rabbi Yehuda holds you can't use cedar wood. He holds that it needs to be lulav wood, myrtle wood, or willow wood. My eres, what does it mean? Cedar wood? Hadath. It's referring to myrtle wood. Yeah? The type of cedar. There's 10 types of cedar. Yeah. How does this work in this biology world? They have like kingdoms and domains and the species and all types of. Anyway, one of these categories is cedar. Shenemar, as it says, etin b'midbar eretz shita v'hadas. How does that puzzle prove that? somehow that pasuk tells me that the hadas is a type of eretz. Yeah. How do they translate that pasuk? Do they have the whole pasuk translated? A place in the wilderness. Yeah. A place in the wilderness, a cedar, a acacia tree, a myrtle, and a pine tree. I'll set in a plain, juniper, black trees, recycling all together. Yeah. Yeah. Somehow that's supposed to prove that the hadas is a type of eretz, even though it's listed. It's just another one of the list. But somehow that's supposed to prove it. Okay. Which means back to that Mishnah, that Brisa that says that if you used boards that were made out of cedar wood, that's a mistranslation. What you really meant to say was boards that were made out of myrtle wood, and another word for myrtle is eres. The only thing is that would be a machlekes, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, yeah, it would need to be myrtle wood. But according to Rabbi Meir, who holds that you can use anything for schach, then it would be actually eres. It would be cedar. I don't have to translate it in some strange way. Right? There's machlekes. Okay, Rabbi Meir Eimer afilu b'mashicha. Rabbi Meir says that you can use a rope. You don't have to use the fronds, the leaves of the lulav. Tanya was taught in a brisa. Amar Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, "Maisi b'akiri Yerushalayim." There's a story with the important people of Yerushalayim. It says other things about the wealthy people of Yerushalayim. So they were very strict about where they sat, where they ate, all types of standoffish. It doesn't put it like that. It puts it more that they were very careful about tumah. So anyway, Ma'aseh Be'akir Yerushalayim she'oigdim esulavein b'gemanias shel zav. Right, so doesn't say. They would tie their lulav with rings of gold. Amrlei misham raya. They said that's a proof. It was really tied with lulav branches underneath. That was just the decoration that they put over it. But really, the tying of the lulav was done with the species of the lulav. Amalu Rabba lahani megadle yashana the berish kalusa. Rabba says to the people that were arranging the lulavim, called the Yerishanas. Megadle over here doesn't mean growing. It's the people that would set it up. Rabba tells them, when you tie up the lulav in the house of the Reish Galusa, they did it probably on Erev Sittis. So, Shairu de Besiad, you should leave a handle. It shouldn't be an interruption between your hand and the lulav. What were they using to tie it? They were probably using the lulav branches anyway. Yeah. In other words, like this. If the lulav needs to be tied, so then the rope that's going around the lulav is part of the mitzvah. If the lulav doesn't need to be tied, then the rope that's going around the lulav is not part of the mitzvah. Now, when it says that you have to take the lulav, if you're taking the lulav, then good. But if you're taking the rope and the lulav doesn't need to be tied, so then the rope is just an extra thing now. It's not part of the mitzvah. So he says that since we hold like the Rabbanon, that's what it sounds like, that it really does not need to be tied. So therefore, when you tie the lulav, don't tie the whole thing up like, all the way up to the top. You have to leave a handle space so that you can grab it and you'll be touching the lulav itself, not the tie that's going around it. Rava says, Rava says it's not a problem anyway. I know it's not the mitzvah, but it's making it more beautiful. 1 second. That's a sheet. Yeah, Chaim, explain. I'm not getting it. He's saying back to that pasuk. The Mishkan was made out of Vatzishitim, right? Was the Erez also in the Mishkan? Oh, yeah. Yaakov had the Bria Chaticha and was a Rosa, right? So now, oh, maybe it's called Shita. But it's called Shita, but really it's an Erez. Very good. Very good. So therefore, when the pasuk says Erez, Shita, and Hadas, Shita we know is Erez. So the continuation of the pasuk would also be all types of Arazim. Very good. Okay. So Rava argues on Rava. Rava says that even though it's not part of the mitzvah, but it's beautifying the mitzvah, it's not considered a chatzitza. And therefore, when you grab the tie of the lulav in your hand, you're actually holding the lulav. It's not like you're holding something extra or something in the tie. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, Rabba says that you can't take the lulav with the glove, with the claw. Can't take the lulav with the claw because it says you're supposed to take the lulav, and you're not taking the lulav, you're taking the claw. It says it's a chatzitza. Rava says no. Taking it with a glove, taking it with a claw is still considered taking it. Still considered lakicha. Says Amar Rava mina minala. I'll prove it to you. Rava says I have a proof that it's acceptable. Why? The lakicha that even though you're taking it with something else, it's still considered taking it. Yeah, they have a discussion about Bayrim. You're not allowed to use a keli to do Bayrim on Shabbos. Not allowed to do Bayrim on Shabbos, but if you're taking the good from the bad, and you're not using a keli, and you're doing it by hand, and you're doing it for immediate use, it's fine. But let's say it's food that you don't touch with your hand. I don't know, salad that's dressed or something. You want to take everything out because there's one thing that you don't want to. You take all the good out. So you use a fork. But that fork is considered your hand. Because if that's the way it's normally done, it's not considered a keli. It's considered part of your hand. Anyway, Rav is saying that if you take something, there's nothing to do with what Rav is discussing, nothing to do with Shabbos. Rav is saying that lakicha, yidei davaracha, it's considered lakicha, it's considered you took it. Because we have certain sukkim where it says the lakach. And I'm going to show you that you can use something else, another instrument, and it's still considered acceptable. So it goes like this. Ezev kotzer. Let's say the hyssop, the grass that's used to sprinkle the water of the paraduma. Misapke b'chut b'kush. If it's very small, you'd have to dip it in. If it was too small to dip in, because it was in a tube, the water, it would attach it to a string or to a toothpick, and they would dip it in, and lift it up. But then he would have to take it actually in his hand. Not because he needs to hold it in his hand, but because when he's going to sprinkle, he has to have control over it. And then he sprinkles it. How is he allowed to do this? It says that you take the Eza V'lakach, Eza V'tavel B'mayim. It says you have to take it. Just like the lulav, it says V'lakachtem. Here it says V'lakach. You have to take it. Are you really taking it if you're holding it by that it's dangling from a string? Rabba has a good proof that if you take it with something else, with the tongs, with the tweezer, with something else, it's considered lakicha. So too, taking the lulav with the claw is considered lakicha. Yeah, it's a big question. In the COVID, and then Mitzrayim, if you could, shake the lulav with gloves, pass it from one to another, going mild. Mitzrayim thing. So Rava would say yes. It's probably going to be something like l'chatchila you shouldn't. If you did, it's something like that. How do you know this? Over there, it's different. Over there, he tied it together. He tied it on. So when it's tied on, and then you're holding it from the end, so it's considered one thing. So it's considered lakicha. But over here, you have just a cloth that's in a handkerchief that's in between your hand and the lulav. It's not tied to the lulav. It's not considered lakicha. How do you know that that's a real proof that lakicha yidei davaraka, when it's not tied, is considered lakicha? Elamehacha. We have another proof. Nafal mishri shveris l'shekis pasal. The ashes are put on top of the water. The ashes of the paradum are put on top, and then they're mixed in. Because there's a contradiction. It says you put the water in, and you put the ashes in. So what the way it's understood is that the water goes into the keli first. It was a stone keli. Then you put the ashes on top. Then you mixed it in, the ashes in, and then you would sprinkle from that water. So the placing of the ashes into the water, on top of the water, that had to be done with kavanah. Nafal mishri feres l'shekes. If it fell in without kavanah, it's possible. It's no good. So you have to actually place it in. But let's say he threw it in. And kasha. You see, how did he throw it in? It was in a shveiferis. It was in a little tube. So if it fell in, it's no good. But let's say he actually threw it in, put the ashes in, but he didn't touch the ashes. He was holding it in a tube. And nevertheless, that's considered balakach benasa. Amai balakhu benasa namarachmana. He didn't actually touch it. It's considered acceptable. That's considered that you take it, that he took it. Rabba says, you shouldn't tie the hadassim and aravas together and then take the lulav and push it down through the top. It would be nice and tight. It happens sometimes towards the end, things tight. It gets loose inside, it falls out, so you push it back through the top. If you push it the other way, it's going to all the pricklies are going to end up somewhere else. So what's going to happen? You're going to pull off leaves from the hishana, from the hadassim. Those broken off leaves are going to end up stuck inside the lulav. Those leaves are not part of the mitzvah, and it's going to be a chatzitza between the lulav and the hishanas and between the other things. Rava says min b'minay nechatzitz. He says I don't get the problem. It's min b'minay, the same species. It's not a chatzitza. Doesn't interrupt. Yeah, it seems like there's a machlekes here. Min b'minay is chatzitz. Yeah. Going back to the first thing that Rabbah told the people from the Reish Galusa that were tying up the lovin, he said, make sure to leave a space for the handle, made a space to hold on. It's the same issue. It's min b'minay. They're using lulav branches to tie it, but Rabbah holds min b'minay is chaytzitz. Rabbah said, there's no problem. He didn't say min b'minay, he said kol l'noisai. But the same idea that it's not. There's certain things that aren't chaytzitz, even though they're interruption, but it's not a problem. Let's say someone sets up his lulav and he ties it together. Lulav with the hishanas on the side and the hadasim and the rabbis is there, it's tied. He says, my lulav is sticking out on the bottom too much. Takes his scissors and he cuts the bottom. Now it's smaller, it's more compact. You can fit it into his case. You can take it with him in the car, whatever. Problem is that when he cut the bottom of the lulav, there's one branch of one leaf of the lulav that's not attached, it's still inside because there's always branches that are coming out. So if you cut it above one of the places where the contact, you cut it above that, so the end of the branch is still sticking in there. That's not really attached to the lulav. So, huh? Yeah, well, they cut their. Yeah, so what's going to happen is in the lulav itself, there's some of them that aren't attached to the spine because their attachment to the spine was already cut off. So they're just hanging in there. Rabbi holds that's a chatzitza. Rabbi Amar min b'minei nechatzitz. Rabbi same opinion because that's not a problem. That's the lulav itself. It's not a chatzitza. The Amar Rabba hada shel mitzvah l'riach boy. We mentioned this yesterday. Rabba says you're not allowed to smell the hadasim. Esrog shel mitzvah mutal l'riach boy, but the esrog you are allowed to smell. My time. What's the reason? Hadas l'reicha koi. The hadas. What's the purpose of the hadas? It's made to smell. I mean, what is it? What do they grow hadasim for? Fragrance. So when you take it for the mitzvah, you're designating it, you're separating it for the mitzvah, you're separating it from smell. Normally, this is used for smell. I'm taking it away from smell, I'm using it for the mitzvah. So it's designated for the mitzvah. Esrog de la achilakai, esrog that's made to be eaten, now when you're redesignating it for the mitzvah, you're removing it from achila. But smell was just a secondary thing that was never part of this intention when you removed it. Yeah, so there's a leniency about smelling the esrog. We said that there's still a problem. The problem is that there's a question about if you have to say a bracha on it. Because it's for the mitzvah, so it's recommended not to smell the esrog. But hadasim is a real issue. Rabba also says, hadas b'mechubar mutal l'riach bay, esrog b'mechubar asal l'riach bay. Hadas, when it's attached to the tree, you're allowed to smell it on the tree, even on Shabbos or Yom Tov. You're not going to pull it off. But the esrog, there's a problem to smell it. My time, what's the reason? Hadas til riach pai, gukoi, hadas, which is made for smell. Isharis lay, if we allow you to smell it, you're not going to cut it off. You smell it. You walk by the bush and you smell it. Esrog de la chilakai, but esrog that's made for eating. Isharis lay, we allow you to smell it. Oh, asilamigze, you're going to pull it off and take a bite. It's going to be a problem. Right. I don't know. But people eat esrog like an apple.
Or you just take it home and you want to cook it up.
Yeah, I don't know. It's from the Gemara. It sounds like he's about to eat it on the spot. You have the hiccups, so citrus takes away the hiccups. Fresh citrus. Maybe you have hiccups. Squirt. Okay. So he needed it for the salad. Yeah. The Amar Rava. Lulav biyamin v'esrog b'smal. The lulav goes in the right hand, the esrog goes in the left hand. My timer. Why is that? Why does the lulav get the right hand? It says hani tlasa mitzvahs v'aychad mitzvah. This is 3 mitzvahs, and this is just 1. Doesn't mean that it's 3 separate mitzvahs. It's 1 mitzvah, but this is 3 parts to it. Amalei Rab Yirmiyah Rab Zrika. My time leima varchin ela al natilas lulav. Why do we say al natilas lulav? Why not al natilas esrog? Well, it's taller. Well, to lift up the esrog. You hold it up here. And say the bracha. No, its species is taller. Rashi says, since it's taller, then everything gets called by it. The tree is tallest, or is it the lulav, the branch is tallest? What does it say? Yeah. The tree is taller. Wow, it's going on the tree. Wow, so it's really nothing to do with what you're holding in your hand. That's very interesting. Yeah. They ask the Rambam writes that the characteristics of the Navi is that he needs to be a Balkaima, he needs to be tall. Yeah. Heard of Pshat, because it's a little odd. Like, why does he need to be tall? What's the Pshat is that that doesn't mean tall. It means Balkaima, that he knows how to stand up. Everyone falls down and they have their ups and downs. Balkaima is that he's always able to get back up right away. Okay. We have a new Mishnah. Where did they shake the lulav? Ready? Haidul Hashem Tchila V'Seif in Halal. Heichan, where? Where did they shake the lulav? Haidul Hashem Tchila V'Seif. Haidu in Halal. And then at the end of Halal, you say Haidu again. Yeah, it's covered over with the Keliyata song. But it's in there. So by both of those, you shake the lulav. Ba'ana Hashem Mishiana, Divri Beis Hillel. And by Hashem Mishiana. Yeah. I'm not sure. Let's see. Divri Beis Hillel, there's a problem over here because Beis Hillel is never mentioned before Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai is always first. That's one of the reasons why Allah like Beis Hillel is because they always would relate Beis Shammai's opinion first. And then they would say their opinion. Here it says Divri Beis Hillel. It's odd. It's usually not like this. Beis Shammai Yomrim Af Ban Hashem Tzlifna. Beis Shammai says also by Hashem Tzlifna. Yeah, they would always say like this: that where do you give a shekel? And it's only by people would say, should I move? Should I change yeshivas? Should I do something different? Change jobs? It says if they're just telling you that you'll be more successful somewhere else, don't move. But if it's taka bad, then that's when you move. You give a shekel if it's bad. If you need a salvation, on Hashem Mashiach, that's where you give the shekel. By on Hashem Matzlichana, you don't give you stay put. Because they tell you it's going to be better in Chicago. Okay, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, Teifa Yisib Ram Gamliel Rabbi Yeshua. I was watching Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Here you see a real Talmud. I was watching Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua. Everyone was shaking, and they didn't shake. They only did by Hashem Mashiach, like the opinion of Beis Hillel. Apparently, it wasn't so clear. Seifa, you see, they may have stretched out their Hashem Mashiach not to be different than everyone else, but he knew what they were doing. He was careful to watch them. Nanu Amandacha Shmei. Well, who brought up this thing? You say Heichan Hayamanim. Where do you shake? Someone said that you have to shake. We didn't say they have to shake. Well, say where do you shake? Hasam Kai. It's referring to going back to one of the first Mishnayos. No, not the first Mishnayos. 2 Mishnayos ago. It said, a lulav has to have. No, it is the first Mishnah. A lulav has to have 3 tvachim plus enough to shake. We said ukadei, right? And enough to shake. I mean 3 tvachim plus another tefa. So once you say they have to be, it has to be able to shake it. So we say, where do you shake it? Okay, Tanan Hasim was taught in the Mishnah over there in Menachos. Shtei alechem, shtei kivseas, atzeres, the 2 loaves of bread for Shavuos and the 2 lambs that are brought on Shavuos. How is it performed? You have to wave them. You put the bread on top of the sheep. These are karbanos, special karbanos for Shavuos. The bread and the right, shtei alechem, the special bread. He puts his hands underneath. He waves it. And he waves. That means like back and forth. And Milo Myrid, up and down. So it's probably both in all 4 directions and then up and down. So Shinemar Shehuna Fashehuram. That was waved and that was raised. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan explains, what are you doing over here? You're presenting it to the one that owns the 4 sides of the world. And you're presenting it up and down to the one that has the heavens and earth. In Eretz Yisrael, they taught it like this. They would wave it from side to side to stop the evil winds, the bad winds, maybe destructive winds. And then they would up and down. That would stop the dew that would spoil the crops. It would come at the wrong time. The bad dew. You know what you see from this? That shiari mitzvah machmanes apranas. Not just the mitzvah itself is a protection, but even the leftovers of the mitzvah, which means parts of the mitzvah that aren't ma'akim, that don't affect the validity of the mitzvah. If you didn't wave it, you're still yaitzer the shnei alecha. Nevertheless, the waving is the protection. You see this? Sharitinu for shiari mitzvah, it still is a protection. Rava says, when we shake the lulav, the same thing happens. You yaitzer the mitzvah by putting it together. Then you go ahead and you shake it. That's the extra part of the mitzvah, and that's a protection. Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov, Mamtile, Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov, he would bring the lulav, shake the lulav, go this way and that way. Umaisilei. Amar, he said, "Den geir be'enei desitna." This is an arrow in the eye of the Satan. Yeah, poke him in the eye. But it says Valav Milsi, you shouldn't talk like that. You're inciting him. Don't get him upset. Make a big deal. He's going to come and say, "Oh, you think you're so protected? You're so protected. I can show you." So you don't want to say anything like that. You don't want to show off that we've got you. You always have to be a little bit. Well, it's humble, but it's also you never to feel secure. You shouldn't feel secure, like, oh, nothing's going to happen to me. I did this. Okay, let's leave it here.